Witch in the Wardrobe Part 2. If you remember, in Part 1, Lucy had found her way into Narnia through the back of a magic wardrobe, and there she'd met a faun, and the whole place was covered in snow and it was permanently winter, and when she came back to tell all her friends about it, no one believed anything that she said. So the next day the children decided to play hide and seek, and Lucy went at once to the wardrobe. She wanted to have one more look inside it, because she was beginning to wonder whether Narnia hadn't in fact been a dream. Meanwhile, Edmund, who could be quite spiteful, secretly followed Lucy to tease her about her imaginary country. He came into the room just in time to see her vanishing inside the wardrobe. Jumping in after her, Edmund closed the door behind him, forgetting what a very silly thing that is to do. But to his astonishment, he too found himself in the middle of a snowy wood. Lucy was nowhere to be seen, and everything was perfectly still, as if he were the only living creature around. Then Edmund heard the sound of bells. It came nearer and nearer, and moments later a sledge swept into sight, driven by a fat dwarf. Behind him sat a great lady, covered in white fur up to her throat. She held a long, straight, golden wand in her hand and wore a golden crown. Her face was white like snow, beautiful and proud. "Stop!" she ordered. "And what, pray, are you?" she asked, looking hard at Edmund. "Well, my name is, it's Edmund," he replied. The lady frowned. "Is that how you address a queen?" she asked sternly. "But I repeat, what are you? An overgrown dwarf?" No, I'm a boy, your majesty," said Edmund. "A son of Adam," hissed the queen and raised her wand. Just as Edmund thought she was going to do something dreadful, she suddenly said in quite a different voice, "Oh, my poor dear child, how cold you look. Come and sit with me." Edmund dared not disobey, so he stepped onto the sledge, and the queen wrapped her warm fur mantle around him. "Now, what would you like best to eat?" she asked. "Oh, Turkish delight chocolates, please, your majesty," said Edmund. The queen took out a small bottle and let one drop fall onto the snow, and instantly there appeared a box of Turkish delight chocolates. Edmund had never tasted anything more delicious in all his life. While he was eating, the queen asked him questions. She got him to tell her that he had brothers and 2 sisters, and that one of his sisters had already been into Narnia and had met a faun. At last the Turkish delight was finished. Edmund wished he could have some more. He didn't know that the Turkish delight was enchanted, and that anyone who had once tasted it would want more and more and more of it. The queen knew quite well what Edmund was thinking, but instead of offering him any more, she said, "Son of Adam, I should so much like to meet your brother and your 2 sisters. Will you bring them to see me? Because if you did come again, you could eat Turkish delight all day long. I have no children of my own, and as you are the cleverest and handsomest young man I've ever met, I think I would like to make you the Prince of Narnia." And then she pointed her wand. "You have only to look for those 2 hills rising above the trees and walk towards them to reach my house. But remember, you must bring the others." "Oh, I'll do my best," agreed Edmund. "You needn't tell them about me," said the queen. "It would be fun to keep it just a secret between the 2 of us, make it a surprise for them." As the sledge swept away, she called behind her, "Don't forget! Come soon!" Edmund was staring after the sledge when he heard Lucy calling. "Oh, Edmund, "So you've got in too!" she cried. "I've been having lunch with dear Mr. Tumnus, and the White Witch has done nothing to him, so he thinks that she can't have found out about him." "The White Witch?" said Edmund. "Who's she?" "Oh, she's a perfectly terrible person," said Lucy. "She calls herself the Queen of Narnia, though all the fauns and nymphs and animals hate her, and she can turn people into stone, and she's put an enchantment on Narnia so that it's always winter here." When Edmund heard that the lady he'd just made friends with was a dangerous witch, he felt very uncomfortable. But he still wanted to taste that Turkish delight more than anything else. By this time they'd walked a good way, and then suddenly they felt the coats around them instead of the branches, and the next moment they were both standing outside the wardrobe in the empty spare room. "Come on," said Lucy, "let's find the others. We've got so much to tell them." But when Lucy told Peter and Susan that Edmund had been into Narnia as well, he suddenly decided to do a very spiteful thing. And he said, "Oh, yes, I have been pretending that her story about a country in the wardrobe is true, just for fun, of course. There's nothing to it, really." Poor Lucy. She gave Edmund one look and rushed out of the room. Now, sightseers often came to see the professor's interesting old house, and the children usually kept out of their way, but one morning, a few days later, they just couldn't seem to avoid them. "Here, let's hide in the wardrobe room," said Susan. But once inside, they heard voices at the door. "Quick," said Peter, and flung open the wardrobe, and they all bundled inside, and suddenly they found themselves surrounded by snow-covered trees. "Why, we've got into Lucy's wood," said Peter. He turned at once to her. "Oh, I'm so sorry for not believing you, Lou." "That's all right," she said. "Let's go and see Mr. Tumnus. He's the nice faun I told you about." So, each borrowing a fur coat, they set off. But at the faun's cave, a terrible surprise awaited them. The door had been wrenched off its hinges, and everything lay smashed on the floor, and nailed to the carpet was a note. It said that Mr. Tumnus had been arrested for high treason against the Queen of Narnia. Poor Mr. Tumnus' house. "She isn't a real queen at all," cried Lucy. "She's a horrible witch, and all the wood people hate her. Oh, we must try to rescue him." "Look," cried Susan suddenly. "There's something among the trees." The whiskered, furry face of a beaver peeked out at them. Are you the sons of Adam, the daughters of Eve?" it whispered, and to show it was a friend, the beaver took out the handkerchief Lucy had given to Mr. Tumnus. "Poor fellow," he said. "If anything happened to him, I must meet you here," he said. And the beaver told them what had happened. And then it added, "Aslan is on the move." Now, none of the children knew who Aslan was, but at his name each of them felt something jump inside. Peter felt brave and adventurous, Susan felt as if beautiful music had just floated by, and Lucy got the feeling you have at the beginning of summer. But Edmund felt only mysterious horror. "And what about Mr. Tumnus?" said Lucy. "Where is he?" "Shh," said the beaver. "I must bring you where we can have a real talk." So they all hurried along behind their new friend, and presently came to a large frozen river. A dam had been built across it, and on top of the dam was a little house. But Edmund also noticed 2 small hills in the distance, and he was sure that the White Witch's palace lay just between them. Mrs. Beaver was waiting for them, and in no time the children were seated round a table eating freshly caught fish and boiled potatoes and with plenty of butter. "And now," said Mr. Beaver, when they'd all finished eating, "we can get to business. Now, first of all, Mr. Tumnus has been taken to the Queen's house and turned into stone." There's nothing any of us could do on our own, but now that Aslan is on the move—" "Oh, yes, yes, tell us about Aslan," they all cried. "Well, Aslan? Why, he's the king," said Mr. Beaver. He's the great lion and the lord of the whole wood. But he's not often here, you understand. Now word has reached us that he's coming back to Narnia, and you are to meet him tomorrow at the stone table. He'll settle the White Witch all right, for there's an old saying that when Aslan returns, and 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve sit in the 4 thrones at Cair Paravel, then it will be the end not only of the White Witch's eternal winter, but of her life. That's why she wants to get you all to her castle, where she can turn you to stone and so rule Narnia forever." There was a moment of silence after Mr. Beaver's last remark, and then Lucy suddenly said, "Where's Edmund?" Everyone rushed to the door and looked out. Snow was falling thickly and steadily, but Edmund was nowhere to be seen. "He will have gone to the White Witch," said Mr. Beaver grimly. "I thought he looked as if he was under her enchantment. We must go to the stone table at once, before the witch catches us." "There's not a moment to lose," said Mr. Beaver.